And joining us on Word Now to discuss the latest developments in Ukraine is a global affairs analyst, Catch Ononuju. Good to have you join us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Let me start by asking you, Ukraine says it is taking, reclaiming territories, initially under the control of Russia, but Russia is also now annexing about 4 regions of Ukraine. Where does this leave this war?
Well, it shows us that it was the wrong thing at the very beginning to allow the war to go on. Russia has now formally done to those regions of Ukraine what it did in 2014 to Crimea. And it has done what it said is a referenda. And of course, Ukraine is not allowing that to be accepted by the international community. And it's there right now. And he has made a big show of it. He has now annexed that part of Ukraine. And that is the most industrially, capital intensive, profitable part of Ukraine when you come to both industries and also farms. And most of that region are actually Russian speaking. That makes we need to look at it holistically and go in the very first place. Then Russia has annexed it. Russia has done a referenda. And as they say, the referenda was quite successful. As you can see, the fighting seemed to have stopped a little while. And they seem to be telling the people that this is all they were after all along. So despite the kind of false flags Russia sold to Ukraine and the world, Russia seemed to have finally gotten what it is now saying to everybody was its original intention, to take this part of Ukraine in its anger in reaction to what it says, Ukraine attempting to allow Ukrainian territory to become available to NATO, for NATO to actually station weapons that will be threatening Russia right on its borders.
You think that this was the original military objective of Russia, even though some analysts are saying that this is now a desperate move by Russia to have some level of military victory. That's on the one hand. I also want to ask you, because you said earlier that this war should have not been allowed to drag on for this long. At what point do you think that there could have been a diplomatic solution to this war?
Well, there should have been a solution right at the very point when people were advised. I believe this crisis didn't start today. It started long before now. It goes back to as far as 2010, when the Ukrainian parliament made a law to say that Ukraine should remain neutral, just like Switzerland, Austria, and other places. Where the mistake came was where they procured Mr. Zelensky and asked him to run for president. They will make him president, and when they make him president, they intend to use him to actually force Ukraine to become part of NATO. If you look at everything holistically, I will tell you that the main mistake was the West allowing for an eastward push towards Russia. If the West has kept to its promise to Mr. Gorbachev that they will not push towards the east, I believe we will not be here now. So the mistake front and center is that of NATO. The NATO eastward expansion is the reason for the Russian reaction that has gotten us all to this place. Now, Mr. Putin saw what he said, he complained, he said, when the Russians saw that the Americans were bringing in weapons, and when he saw that, he didn't want to make any more argument. He simply moved into Ukraine. And by the time the Americans and their allies were begging him to please hold on, he said no. As far as he's been able to catch them red-handed, trying to bring in weapons to do military exercises for Ukraine, that simply means that they have no intentions of respecting the regard and the promises they were given to Mr. Gorbachev
And
that
let me
there
just
will be
quickly
no
jump in
eastward
here.
expansion.
Let me quickly jump in
Yes.
here because we know that now the war is on and been dragging on for, it's now in its 219th day. But the US and EU are now threatening sanctions against Russia for the annexation of these regions in Ukraine. And there will be, I think it's today, a vote by the UN Security Council to condemn this annexation and then call on other countries around the world not to recognize these territories as Russian territories. How far do you think this will go, especially because Russia and China are also members of the United Nations Security Council?
Well, those are simply rhetorics. Those rhetorics will not go anywhere because you may not get China to agree to vote to condemn Russia. Sanctions also don't make sense. Sanctions will not make sense in today's world because you got sanctions not working due to the fact that Russia, China, India, Brazil, and the rest of the people who don't agree with the United States are actually with Russia. They've also discovered that this can also damage the dollar standard. Russia insistence on everybody buying rubles and buying their goods in rubles if you're buying from Russia has made the ruble so strong, so that has actually taught the other members of the international community that there's a way to actually do away with the dollar standard. A lot of things have actually come out of this thing. So do not bank on sanctions. Sanctions don't work anymore. They used to work on it. And what are you going to do? Because the powers don't agree. How are you going to get China to agree to put sanctions on Russia? How would you get India to agree not to look at its own private Indian needs and Indian interests? Nobody's going to follow the US. So I believe the world has changed through this war. And the world has watched Putin on television say he has done a referenda, and the referenda says it got more than 90% saying yes. And you saw the leaders from those regions now join Russia. So whatever it is you say, those are rhetorics. As far as he's concerned, he has used muzzle, he has done what he said, and as he's telling us now, he actually tricked the world to think he had intentions in the rest of Ukraine. No, what he wanted was to gain access right from the Luhansk, going through Mariupol, creating a road corridor going straight down to Crimea. Now he's gotten that. So what you now have is a recreation of Russia got Crimea from the Ottomans. And then the rest, they say, is history. Don't also forget, historically, Crimea had always been part of Russia when Russia took Crimea from the Ottomans in 1774. So the 1953 decree saying that Crimea should come under the administrative control of the Ukraine Oblast was simply an administrative instruction by Mr. and the rest of them who were mostly Russian speaking, but were chairman of the Politburo. So Russia has now gone back to take back its old territory that it's called the Donbass. So the Donbass is now being linked directly to Crimea, and they are looking towards Odessa. And I believe this should have been prevented right from the word go. I believe the law in Ukraine that say Ukraine should have remained very, very neutral as at
Mr.
2010,
we do have to leave it there. We do have to leave it there. We're keeping our eyes on the vote by the UN Security Council and how it goes. Thank you so much for talking to us, Global Affairs Analyst.
Thank you for having me.